Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, a show I do twice a week where I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. And today's random episode is uh, Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 10, The Loss. And I can't seem to get my camera where I want it. It makes my forehead look big. Anyway. The episode starts off with Troy in her office, and she's counseling some lady about the loss of her husband, who apparently died on an away mission. And um, she's just talking about the death and how it affected her, and how um, her husband will be turning 38 this week, or and um, after the funeral, she told the people to take all of his possessions, and get rid of them. And she says that was a mistake because she um, woke up that morning and realized that there was no that he wasn't gone, or he was gone, and that he was true. She like realized that he was truly dead, and that that she was alone, and I guess had sort of been putting off that feeling, and putting off the idea that she was alone, and, and sort of ignoring it, and ignoring her feelings. And um, Troy walks to some, like a cupboard or something, opens it up, and hands her this music box, which apparently belonged to her husband, because she says they didn't get rid of everything. Then on the bridge, Picard is talking to Riker. I guess they had just come back from a holodeck program where they were riding horses on a trail, and he talks about this trail in the Himalayas that he rides, and tells Riker that he should really get out and get a fresh breath of holodeck air, which I thought was kind of weird, because you're not getting a real fresh breath of air, but a fresh breath of holodeck air, which I guess it simulates it enough to where they feel like they've left the ship. And then Worf catches something on the sensors, and then it goes away, and they're not sure about what it is, and it's also affecting Troy, who's basically getting like a migraines or a headache or something, and it's affecting her, and she she's like about to pass out, and then they speculate maybe it's a sensor ghost. And I almost said ghost like Mike from Red Letter Media, who lives in Wisconsin, and says ghost, because he watches those ghost channels, the ghost shows, ghost hunters or whatever, which I used to watch, but it got kind of old after a while because nothing's happening. And I think South Park did an episode about that. So, because they're not sure what it is, Picard orders a full stop, and then right at the same time, Troy passes out. So that's the teaser. It's kind of short, to the point. Oh. So then, after the teaser and credits roll, music, they 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 say that all systems. I guess Data says this is all systems are normal, and there's no further indication of the anomaly. So, uh, Picard orders, or says to go to warp 6, and they engage, but then something happens and the ship starts to um, rattle or whatever, and Picard calls Geordi, and Geordi says that there was something happened that caused the warp field to collapse and is now pulling the ship. Then Troy, we see again. Um, oh, and it's pulling the ship at a 1/10 impulse. So Troy, we see again, who's like, you know, looks like she has like a migraine headache or something, and she calls Crusher and says that she's dizzy. She's like very dizzy, and Crusher says that she'll be there as soon as she can. She's getting calls all over the ship about people having migraines, and so then back on the bridge, there's this one ensign, and she has two lines pretty much throughout the whole episode, which I thought was pretty funny. Because Major Grin, I don't know if you're familiar with his channel, he shows all the times that the one guy, I forget his name, on Discovery, like his only line a lot of times is no response. So Major Grin calls him no response guy. Major Grin is also goes by nitpicking nerd. So uh, this woman says that the ship is still being pulled, same heading, same speed. So I'm gonna call her same heading, same speed woman. Then we get Troy again, and um, Dr. Crusher shows up to Troy's quarters and asks how she's feeling, and she says that when I first called you, I was feeling really dizzy. Now I'm feeling a little better. I feel like I can stand up now. And then Picard calls. It was either Picard or Riker calls all personnel, all bridge personnel to the observation lounge, and uh, Crusher asks if she asks Troy if she feels up to that, and she says yes. So they get there, and they're talking about, they're speculating about what's going on, and uh, Riker asks if, and this is where we get a some sort of. Riker asks if it's some sort of tractor beam, and Data's like, I don't know. I don't. They don't know what it is. They don't. They're not sure. They're speculating on different things, and then they get to Troy, and Picard asks Troy what she feels, and she says she doesn't feel anything, and she says it multiple times. And Picard says it's okay, there may be nothing out there to sense. And she says no, I sense nothing, like I don't have my abilities anymore, basically. So so she's lost her powers, so to speak, as a Betazoid, and can only rely on her human half now. And in sick bay, they're examining her, and uh, Crusher says to Deanna that there is some brain damage there. And I was like, maybe she was watching Starfleet Academy, and that's what caused the brain damage. Now I've seen this episode before, and it's okay. I'll get to the review and we'll talk about that. But um, it's whenever there's a Troy-centered episode, it immediately I don't like Troy as a character, or I don't like her episodes. As a character, she's okay, but Troy-centered episodes are just bad. They're just bad. Anyway, so maybe the brain damage was from watching one of her previous episodes too. Okay, so um, Troy, and then so Beverly's basically telling her that that she'll be okay, and then that she has to sort of. It's like if a human were to go blind all of a sudden, that they would have to. She would have to adapt and stuff like that. And Troy sort of gets annoyed at this, and they're bickering kind of back and forth. It's not, like I said, it's not new Trek level bickering like you get in Strange New Worlds and Starfleet Academy and Discovery and all. It's not that level bickering, but they are sort of. You can tell Troy's sort of irritated about the situation. So then Riker comes to visit, and he talks about how, or she talks about how she recognizes this. Um, she's seen it with other people that she's counseled when they have a disability, and some people are like just overly nice, and with handicapped people, sometimes people don't want to be treated special. They just want to be treated like everybody else, and things like that. And she starts getting kind of pissy with uh, Riker, even though he didn't really say or do anything wrong. And then and I've got it written down here that it reminds me of Nog when he lost his leg in Deep Space Nine. And so in Deep Space Nine, Nog loses his leg, gets pissy with Jake and everybody else, and starts hanging out in the holosuite with Vic Fontaine. And he's on medical leave. Uh, and people treat him like a hero, which he is. In the previous episode, he, you know, was in combat, and that was a rough episode, and so it sort of reminded me like that. And then Esri had to sort of was the counselor then. Well, she's Trill, so she's not an empath, but she basically was the counselor for Deep Space Nine at a time when when she first came on board, she didn't feel up to the grade as a Dax, and wanted to leave. And of course she became a host sort of in a pinch because Jadzia had been killed, and they needed to transfer the host, the symbiote very quickly. And then Cisco had sort of talked her into being a counselor because he recognized the need for a counselor at that time because the war was, still going on, and they were 3 or 4 years into it at that point, and people were getting killed regularly. And then eventually, she was able to talk to Nog and work him through his problem, and he got a new leg anyway. And then 1,000 years later in the future, we have people with disabilities like being in a wheelchair and being deaf, and somehow they can't get new parts or whatever. But we're not going to talk about Starfleet Academy. Not too much. I'm going to dip into it here and there throughout because there is a mention of a wheelchair later on, which I'll get to. So basically on the bridge they are, or no, on the bridge, Data is examining the ship and trying to figure out what's going on. And I can't read my own handwriting. There's a vertical particle trajectory, which he does a scan, and you see a bunch of dots. So other scans came up negative; they didn't see anything. This scan comes up and a bunch of dots. Then we go back to Troy, and she's talking to that lady again. Then go back to Data, and Data explains that the objects exist in 2 dimensions. They do not. So they have. Geordi says they have length and width, but no height, and they demonstrate on screen what they are. And they speculate. Well, Picard speculates that they might be life forms, and they can. They were able to somehow polarize the gravitational field around the Enterprise, and it's pulling them along. And then Geordi speculates that that if they go to warp 6, they can break free of them. So Geordi says something along the lines of, "It's too bad," to Troy, that it's too bad that you can't feel their presence. And she basically says, "What do you mean?" and gets pissy and runs off. And then she goes to sickbay again and starts talking to Crusher. And Crusher tells her that she's doing what she can, but she can't really figure out what's going on, and that imagine if it was the other way around. And then Troy says, "If it was the other way around, I would have prevented this in the first place," and blah, 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 and gets all pissy with her and takes off. And then goes to Picard and wants to resign as the ship's counselor. And Picard reminds her that most ships don't have a counselor with an empathic ability, and that empathic awareness is not a requirement of the job. And I was thinking about that too. It's like, well, wouldn't she also have to learn psychology and all those things like Esri did? Esri was a counselor, and she wasn't an empath. She's just a trill. Uh, and trills, I mean, they're not too much different from humans. And so then he starts to tell a story about how when he was in the academy, there was a teacher in a wheelchair. So there we are. I got to the wheelchair. So in the 24th century, they have people in wheelchairs too. And we haven't gotten to Deep Space Nine yet, I don't think. And there, Captain Pike famously is in a wheelchair. But, mm, but, uh, so one could nitpick that there shouldn't be people in the wheelchair at this point in time, especially after Nog is able to regrow a leg. But there are people now that sort of see their handicap as like a good thing, like they embrace it. So even if they were to get like a fake leg, um, they don't want that. I don't know. I mean, I've heard stories about that. I would think that if I cut off my finger, right, and or my hand, let's say I was fighting with my dad. We were sword fighting, and my dad cut off my hand. I would probably get another hand, a robotic hand, if there was such a thing. Anyway, uh, but I would not try to kiss my sister, uh, or hook up with her anyway. So, um, yeah, so you could nitpick that, especially after Nog. But then in Starfleet Academy, I don't think in 1,000 years from now we would have people in wheelchairs that often. I mean, I'm not a big imaginative person, but we already have robotics and AI and stuff like that where we're getting to the point to where we can have mechanical arms that where you can that hook up to your brain. Uh, Gavin Blackburn is here. Hello, Gavin. Um, I was just talking about people in wheelchairs in the future and robotic arms. And Michelle Fairy Tales is here. Hello. And how if why there would be people in wheelchairs in the future. And my example was I personally would think that if I were to, let's say I'm sword fighting with my dad, and my dad cuts off my hand, uh, I would want to get a replacement hand, but I would not kiss my sister. That was the joke that I made. Okay. So anyway, if you're just tuning in, I made that joke twice in a row. So wheelchairs in the future is a thing, even in TNG. But I'm hopeful to think that in 1,000 years from now, people are not going to be in wheelchairs, uh, and they would be able to repair their eardrums if, say, their daughter was like Black Canary, uh, and had Black Canary abilities, uh, or if you were blind, you would have prosthetic eyes. I'm just saying that I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I would think it would be stupid to come up with that kind of idea. Uh, but what do I know? I'm not a Hollywood writer. Anyway, Picard starts to talk about this teacher at Starfleet Academy who's in a wheelchair, and Troy doesn't want to have anything to do with it, and basically tells him to shut the fuck up. Riker visits Troy, and Troy finally breaks down and starts crying, and sort of she's going through the stages of grief, basically, and uh, she's crying in Riker's arm, and then Riker points out that they're finally on equal footing because she can't sense his emotions, and he's never been able to sense her emotions. I would argue that there's probably one time a month that you could probably sense her emotions. I mean, maybe. I'm just saying she is half human. Uh, so then LaForge calls Riker. He says he's ready to try to go to warp again, and uh, Riker says he'll be there. He'll be there shortly. He'll be on the bridge shortly. So they try to go to warp. It doesn't work. They still can't break free. Um, Data records like some sort of movement in their pattern, which they think is possible indication that it's sentient life, and that uh, Picard thinks that there might be a way to communicate with them. So, Data, he wants Data to try to work on that. So Troy is now in 10 forward, basically crying in her beer, and surprised she's not eating chocolate. Maybe she was. I wasn't paying that much attention. Guinan sits down and talks to her and says, "Do you want to talk about anything?" She says no, and then she says, "Great, because I'm so sick of people coming in here, always wanting to talk about their troubles to me," and says something else, and Guinan, or she tells Guinan that she would be a good counselor, and Guinan says, "Oh, you know, I hear there's an opening. I'm going to try to get that counseling position." And she says that it's not so easy. You have to rely on your instincts and da 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 da. And basically makes Troy realize that Guinan doesn't really want that position. She's just trying to realize that she has other instincts that she can draw off of. But it's still not convincing to Troy. And I have a note here saying, "Remember when Whoopi was cool and funny?" I wrote that. I just wrote that down because I remember. Oh, my cat is doing something to scare the shit out of me. I thought somebody was knocking on the door or something, like a cop. Uh, Data. I can't read my writing. Oh, Data is detecting sort of some gases from these beings or something like that, and uh, they call it a cosmic string, and they put it on the screen. It's like this purple cloud ribbon rift looking thing that the ship is heading towards. Worf, of course, recommends firing torpedoes at it, and because I didn't remember this episode like verbatim, I remember the episode, I've seen it, but Troy episodes are they go in and out of my brain because I couldn't remember if Picard turns it down or not, because usually, and I've talked about this before, Worf gets turned down all the time by his suggestions get turned down by Picard like 99% of the time. But this time, Geordi says that it might work, but they should do like a spread it out so they're not firing directly into the rift or into their plane of existence or their field. They call it their field. So they fire the torpedoes, and the ensign says that there's no effect. This time, Picard says fire it into their field, and once again, no effect. So we go back to Troy's quarters, and there's a knock. There's a ring at the door, and she says to come in, and it's that lady that she was counseling earlier in the episode. And she says, "Oh, I should have told you that I'm no longer going to be the ship's counselor." And she says, "Why? I came to tell you that you were right about your instincts to tell me she had counseled her without her empathic abilities, and told her, because the lady had said that she felt like a new woman. She woke up feeling like a new woman, and but Troy was like, I don't think it's been long enough for you to have those kind of feelings, and that you're probably just, you're just making yourself feel that way, and it's a false impression." And she says, well, "You were right. I was doing that, and that you should not, feel that way." And then Troy, or Picard calls Troy to his ready room, and he says that he needs her on this mission, that because of what's happened to her, she may be able to draw on her other instincts and her other abilities as a counselor, all this stuff, to figure out what's going, how they can communicate, because what Data was doing earlier, and DJ Play Nice is in the house. Hello, DJ Play Nice. What Data was doing wasn't working. They've done all scientific things. Now they need your unscientific abilities, just your regular abilities. So Data and Troy are in the observation lounge, and she starts thinking of like, maybe these beings are acting instinctively, because Data says, "Well, we don't know. We're not thinking on a two-dimensional level." And then, of course, that makes me think of Doc Brown, who's like, "Marty, you're not thinking fourth dimensionally." So she says maybe this is an instinctual thing for them to go to this rift, this cosmic strip, or whatever they call it, cosmic string, and it's like a moth to a flame. That maybe the string doesn't affect them in a negative way. and they basically want to recreate the vibrations of the string to pull the Enterprise, for them to pull the Enterprise away from the rift, because the rift is basically, or the string is basically like about the same gravitational effect as like a black hole. Uh, and now they have like 23 minutes left, and so they want to use the deflector to the deflector dish to create this vibration. And then we get the ensign again, who I called earlier. Ensign, same course, same speed, because well, on Discovery you have ensign no response, but this one is same course, same speed. So they try it again, same course, same speed. Picard says to turn up the volume. Perfect example. Perfect example of language in Star Trek. Oh, I wish I'd have thought of this like a thousand years ago. Language in Starfleet Academy is language today, right? So, uh, if we were to apply the same, because they use things like bitch and boo, you're my boo, and uh, you know, they're like practically giving people fist bumps. I haven't seen that yet, but they're giving, they're doing high fives. Uh, this being in the 90s, if we were to apply the same logic, Picard would not have said turn up the volume. He would have said pump up the volume or pump up the jam. So that just thought of that just now, and so she starts smiling because it works, and Riker's looking at her, and he realizes that she's sensing things again, and she goes, "I sensed it." Uh, so they're back on in ten forward, and she basically says that she was sensing them all along, but she was so overwhelmed with so many life forms or whatever, uh, and Riker akins it to like a short circuit, that it sort of overloaded her senses, and basically these things were going, that cosmic string was like their home. They were going home, so like a moth to a flame sort of type. So then Troy realizes that she was acting shitty towards Crusher, uh, which again, modern Trek, they would not have that type of self awareness. So points for that. Um, and she, uh, my little note here. Oh, there was an Orville episode like this. Basically copied this episode, and from what I remember, I think it was done a little better. Um, but not bad for a shitty Troy episode, because I hate Troy episodes. So I gave it a 6 out of 10. Above average, slightly. Slightly above average. Um, and and but yeah, she was annoying when she first lost her ability. Like Nog in that episode, he was annoying. That episode, I think, was a better episode of somebody losing an ability or losing something. Uh, But yeah, he was really annoying, and I really wanted to punch him, especially when he went on that double date with Jake and basically ruined the date. And then, so basically, he cocked blocked his best friend because she probably didn't, she probably, he didn't get any that night, you know. So, not bad for a Troy episode. Um, and I am going to do a review of this week's episode of Starfleet Academy, which is also based partially around a Betazoid and her abilities. Who she's like, what did I say? She was like black canary. She has black canary powers. Um, and the reason is not because it was a great episode, but they toned down some of the dumb jokes. They still had dick mentions of dicks and balls. Um, it was uh, the term. I've heard neurotic say this. Um, just because you're the smartest retard, you're still a retard. I probably shouldn't say that, but I said it, so it's done. That's what this episode, Starfleet Academy, this episode was. The the smartest retard, um, or the sharpest crayon, I guess, would be a nicer way to say it, a more PC way to say it. That's why I'm doing a review. I'm going to do it on 8 p.m. on Monday if I get out of work on time. If not, it'll be 9 because my work hates me and I can't have just steady days off and work schedules. Uh, and I have some things written down that I want to talk about in that episode that are kind of stupid and don't make sense, and which is every episode, but some things that are kind of neutral about her and her ability, and some things they kind of cleared up about the deaf guy, but then again, you're 1,000 years past the point where you can regrow a leg, or no, 800 years past the point where you can regrow a leg. Why can't you regrow an eardrum? But I'll talk about that on Monday, and I have a grade for it and everything. So uh, it's not good, but it wasn't terrible. Still not above average. Maybe slightly above average. Um, and we got 4 more episodes to go. Anyway, let's see what people are saying. Let's see. Michelle Fairy Tales. I truly hope people would be able to have new body parts and no wheelchairs in the future. Well, in Star Trek, you can have an entirely robot body, android body, and you can transfer your consciousness, which they did to Picard. So there's no reason to have any disability at all. DJ Play Nice says thanks for hosting. Gavin Blackburn says Picard should enter the bridge and shout "Cowabunga, dudes!" Exactly, like the modern vernacular in New Trek is and then says Riker totally to your yeah, like I don't understand why they can't see that, or maybe they do. They just they're just stupid and uh, gag me. Michelle Ferry says, "Gag me with a spoon." I hate the dialogue in New Trek. I quit watching Starfleet after episode 3. I mean, episode 3 was bad enough. I mean, they're all bad. They're all. This sixth episode was the least offensive one, which is not saying much. But anyway, uh, this went on longer than I expected. I have to go to the grocery store and get some cat food because my cat keeps pacing and staring at me and meowing. Uh, oh, so let's get to okay. So we're still on the loss again for so we're 2 for 2 for empathic episodes, not the worst episode in the world. And it is season 4, so we're in the thick of good TNG, or at least not terrible TNG. Press the randomize again button. Episode Enterprise, episode 3, 1, the Zindi. I gotta check and see if I've done that. I don't think that I have. I'll be right back. I have not done the Zindi, so I'll be back on Wednesday to do the Zindi, and let's see. Oh, Admiral Teague time soon. Is it? Is it? Is he stream on Thursdays? I never know. It's. I guess he streams on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Is that correct, Gavin Blackburn? Anyway, what does anybody have any thoughts on that rule of acquisition that I put out? DJ Play Nice, you weren't here. I came up with a rule of acquisition that I'm going to try to end the show with every night. Oh, 45 minutes. Okay. Okay, yeah, just enough time to go to the store. I had a rule of acquisition that I came up with that I was going to write a fan fiction episode about. And I may still do it, and I thought more about it today. It's been tumbling around in my head for like a decade now, but I listened to Mark Zicree, who wrote Far Beyond the Stars, and he was talking about writing and the writing process and the difference between what he writes and uh, Starfleet Academy, and it spark some thought on how I would proceed with that episode that I hadn't thought of before. And so, anyway, I came up with the first thing that I did was I came up with a rule of acquisition. And then I thought, how can I apply that rule of acquisition to this episode that I'm thinking about, and what would be the consequences, and what are, da 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 da. And if you ever watch like Script Doctor or some of the other YouTubers, they sign off with like some sort of saying, right? So I figured I would sign off with this rule of acquisition, and I kind of wanted to see what people thought about it. So when I end the stream, just put a comment what you think about it, and let me know, and maybe I can improve on it, or maybe I can keep it the same, or whatever. I just want to know your thoughts, please. So the rule of acquisition is this. Rule of acquisition number 502. Remember, greed is good, but it's dangerous. Proceed with caution. I am the Dead Man. Have a good night. See you. Hopefully.